Hey everyone, and welcome back to Joey's Retro Handhelds. Today we're going to take a look at the Retroid Pocket 5. Just to add a small blurb here at the beginning, every issue that I found during pre-release is fixed in the retail units. So we're just going to do this video based off of the retail update. The Retroid Pocket 5 has a Snapdragon 865 processor, and it allows you to play a ton of Android games. And for emulation purposes, you could play all systems, up to and including 3DS, GameCube, PS2, and Wii U. And you can do that upscaled for the most part. Obviously, there are a few problem games and all of that sort of thing. It's not always worry-free, but for the most part, you could do all of this. And then even some Nintendo Switch if you want to. Now, I've already done dedicated showcase videos on all of those systems, so 3DS, PlayStation 2, GameCube, Switch. You can check out all of my videos. I've done a lot on the Retroid Pocket 5 already, so if you want to see specific games or dedicated showcases, check that out, and that'll give you a good idea of what exactly can run, but it's just everything. The price here is $219 US plus shipping, directly from Retroid's website, and there are 4 different color options. Personally, I've pre-ordered the GameCube one, and it is stuck in Canada Post hell right now because they're on strike. There's 8GB of RAM and 128GB of internal storage, both of which could be a problem. Since the retail update, I haven't been able to crash games by adding HD texture packs anymore, like I was able to in the pre-update, so the RAM seems to be getting better and adjusted for retail. Now, Android games themselves could be 20 plus gigabytes in size, especially the popular ones. And if you want to run HD texture packs on the other emulators, or if you just don't have Switch games combined for DLC, update, and base game, you are going to be installing those updates and DLC to the internal storage. And with all of that, you're going to hit that 128GB internal storage cap very quickly. Now, the big highlight of this device is, of course, the 5.5-inch 1080p AMOLED screen, which is absolutely gorgeous, and it carries this handheld quite a bit. The black bars blend in nicely if you are running 4x3 content that has some black in it. And it gets super dim as well as extremely bright. I'm not going to say it's as good as an Odin 2 Mini for outdoor usage, but it is better than most IPS displays that I've seen. Now, the screen passes the UFO test for 60Hz, confirmed in RetroArch as well, and I haven't noticed any added input lag or anything different than previous Retroid releases. The Retroid Pocket 5 has Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth, with Wi-Fi 6 being a great choice for streaming. Both remote and local, I found that the range and throughput were both very good in comparison to Anbernic devices, let's say. On the battery front, the lowest battery that I saw was 215 minutes, or 3 hours and 35 minutes. And that was in Android games like Honkai Star Rail or Switch emulation, with basically everything maxed out. But weirdly enough, I also ran this same test for GameCube and PlayStation 2, and I had to do it twice because I got the same results as I did with the high-performance Android games. And I just didn't trust my findings, so I ran it again and it was the same thing. So yeah, the worst case scenario for Android games, Switch emulation, PS2, GameCube, upscaled is 3 hours, 35 minutes of battery time. Now, if you're wondering how that jumps to older retro systems, I ran Game Boy Advance and I saw a big increase over the pre-release update. Game Boy Advance was able to hit the 11-hour mark, which is just great. In standby drain, so basically keeping the device in sleep mode with nothing really happening, I clocked it at 5 to 8% over a 24-hour period. That's pretty average for an Android device. It's not great, it's not bad, but it's average. Keep in mind the bottom of this page for my testing methodology here. Brightness will definitely affect battery life if you lower it, so you'll get better battery life than what you're seeing on screen. And upscaling or downscaling in this scenario, since everything was upscaled, would too. My GameCube and PS2 tests were done at 3x upscaling, so once again, in line with my methodology to just find out what the worst case battery life is. With my many hours of using this device, I'm gonna guess I've probably used this more than anybody else, I found that it's more comfortable than the previous Retroid Pocket 4 Pro and 3 Plus. But the positioning of the D-pad is tough to use in a lot of stick-heavy games. A lot of you have noticed in my previous videos that my thumb was cramping or crunching in a lot of showcases that I've done. And yeah, that doesn't feel great. To me, the Odin 2 Mini is a much better design. It has stick top and it's the same size form factor. And if you're going to do stick bottom, it needs to be inset a lot more. A lot of people point to the DualSense or DualShock controllers as to a reason why D-pad top works. But you have to look at that design because of how far apart the D-pad is from the sticks. This isn't that, it is completely different, and it does cramp your thumbs quite a bit. Now the D-pad here is the same Vita-style Retroid D-pad that we've seen in almost all of their devices now. And it is loose, and it is accurate, and the sticks themselves are the same idea. There's just no major issues to them, and they're great. The face buttons are slightly more muted compared to the recent mini release, but is still on the louder side for those that are worrying about it. The shoulders and other buttons can be quite loud as well. Now that might be a deal breaker for a lot of people, and a lot of people have pointed that out in my previous showcases, because I just did regular me playing the game with sound playing, and you could hear all of it in the background. So I'm going to play a little snippet here so you can hear what others are hearing. The speakers on the device are a tad disappointing. They're not great, but they're not bad either. They're solely in the middle, and I wish that a little bit more thought would be put into speakers. You can have a listen here. The Retroid Pocket 5 does have active cooling that you can adjust in the software, but I found that it doesn't seem to get quite hot at all, no matter the task, where the Odin 2 Mini seemed to get really hot at times. The fan doesn't seem to kick in that often, but if you do throw it into sport mode, you will hear it and it will be loud. Otherwise, the software is like most Retroid builds, with small additions, like a slider for the joystick LEDs, the usual performance toggles, swapping between Nintendo and Xbox layouts for buttons, and so on. Now, performance-wise, we talked about it before, but I have dedicated showcase videos on PlayStation 2, GameCube, (3DS), Wii U, Switch, and even Game Boy Advance, just for fun. Lots of games tested, and so I'm confident in saying that you are pretty well set to play most any game that you want on any of these systems, besides Switch, with the usual caveat of some games just have problems emulating. And I show those examples in those showcase videos, so you should check that out again. Okay, so let's talk comparables now. There is the Anbernic RG556 and the new Anbernic RG406H. Both of them are cheaper than the Retroid Pocket 5, and the 556 shares a similar OLED screen, but the 406H is using an IPS display. The 556 has worse sticks, while the 406H is using the newer Anbernic sticks, and those are a clone of Retroids with just different stick caps. Now, the 556 and the 406H have much worse performance with the T820 processor that they use, and that struggles with a lot of the things that the Retroid Pocket 5 just does. And so you need to do a lot of heavy tweaking with the T820 to get a lot of games to run, where the Retroid Pocket 5 can just run them. Now, even at a cheaper price point, I would spend the extra for the Retroid Pocket 5 in both scenarios, because what's going to happen is you will spend for the 406H or the 556 And I'm going to guarantee you're going to buy the next revision of those, and those still likely will not be as good as the Retroid Pocket 5 is. So save that money, future money, and just buy the Retroid Pocket 5 now. The Retroid Pocket Mini is another alternative in the same price point, and I think if you have a specific size requirement that is in line with the size of the Mini, then yeah, that is a great option. However, I find the 5 to be perfectly sized for both portability and use in comparison to something like the Mini, which I think is more of a sort of pocketable, really portable device, but when you're mostly at home, it really pales in comparison to other devices. But again, this is going to be a personal preference decision. For me, the 5 fits more of my needs, but the Mini is also a great device too. And then we have the Odin 2 Mini and the Odin 2. Now, in comparison to the Odin 2 Mini, the Retroid Pocket 5 has a much better screen, better battery life and cooling, and is much cheaper. While the Odin 2 Mini is much more powerful, has a better layout with stick top, and I find it to be slightly more comfortable just because of that fact. Now, the main uses of that extra power will be for Nintendo Switch games, a lot of win later, and for docking if you want to upscale it past 1080p. But if those aren't things that you care about, then you should save the money and get the Retroid Pocket 5. For my own personal use cases, I actually sold my Odin 2 Mini and the Retroid Pocket 5 is replacing it. Now, I don't really consider the Odin 2 and Retroid Pocket 5 to be competing devices, but it would be very similar to the Odin 2 Mini in the points that I made. Except the Odin 2 has a much worse display than both of them, with a lot of visible ghosting, as well as it being an IPS display, and it is a much larger handheld, removing the portability or pocketability or any sort of bringing it out of the house sort of ability that the Retroid Pocket 5 I think has in favor of it. To me, a much better comparison would be the Odin 2 Portal, which is upcoming. I think that would be a better option to compare to the Retroid Pocket 5. And I think in that scenario, it comes down to, do you want a solely at-home device? Then you would get the Odin 2 Portal. Or do you want a device that could come out with you often? And that's the Retroid Pocket 5. But I think that's something that only you could answer. For me, once again, the larger size devices are taken up by x86 devices. So my Asus ROG Ally X would be my sole big device. Overall, the Retroid Pocket 5 is a great device, and I find it to be a perfect companion device to my Asus ROG Ally X. Despite the flaws that it has, it's a great companion, and it used to be an Odin 2 Mini for me. This is going to take over that mantle, and I think I kind of upgraded there. Given this is the end of the year and I'm starting to think about best handhelds of the year, I can easily see this being a 1-2 combination between the Asus ROG Ally X and the Retroid Pocket 5, because to me, those are two of the best devices this year that you could buy, and I highly recommend them both. That'll be a wrap for this one. Check out my links in the description, and thank you all for watching.